Hello, beautiful soul. Welcome back to Unfiltered Soul Shifts, where we stop treating ourselves like problems to fix and start meeting ourselves like beings to understand. Today, we're exploring a topic that sits right at the crossroads of connection, nervous system safety, and personal boundaries. Emotional availability, yours and theirs. Not the performative version, not the I'm fine version, not the version where you just keep on trying harder until someone finally meets you, but the real one. Now, before we begin, just take one deep breath in and exhale as if you are dropping your shoulders into the earth. This episode is for you if you've ever wondered, why do I feel like I'm the only one carrying the emotional tone? Why does their silence feel like a verdict? How do I care without losing myself? So let's go. There's a kind of doorway that exists in relationships. Sometimes it's visible, sometimes it isn't. But when it's invisible, we often just keep on knocking because we believe that if we find the right words or soften the right moment or prove our love, emotional availability will appear. But emotional availability isn't a prize. It's not something you can earn through patience. It's not about willpower. It's about capacity. And capacity is influenced by safety. It's influenced by past experience. It's influenced by nervous system regulation, by self trust. So, today we're going to learn how to tell the difference between avoidance and capacity. And we'll do that gently. In other words, without turning anyone into a villain. Because sometimes we're not dealing with them being bad. Sometimes we're dealing with a person who doesn't know yet how to be present with emotion. But also, we need to be honest, right? Because honesty matters. So let's start with the question you likely came here with. What does emotional availability look like? Not in theory, not in love language posts, but in real moments. Emotional availability is a steady presence, not constant intensity. So here's a few signs that emotional availability is present. Consistency in small ways. In other words, they don't show up when things are exciting. They show up all the time, even when it's quiet. They remember. They follow through on what they said they would do. Vulnerability without pressure looks like sharing something real without making you carrying the weight. So, like, they can say, sure, this is hard on me, or I need a moment, or I don't know what I'm feeling yet, but you don't have to feel like you have to carry that. And they don't punish you for needing time to. Responsiveness that matches the situation looks like emotional available people don't treat connection like emergency, right? They don't disappear and reappear without context. They might take space, but they don't erase. Repair after rupture. In other words, if something goes wrong, they don't need to pretend it didn't happen. They return. They apologize in a way that addresses impact, not just intent. And then lastly, I suppose, clarity without boundaries and pace. They can say, okay, I've had my time, I can talk now. Or I can't talk right now, but I'll respond later. I'm not ready for this conversation yet. Clarity is emotional availability. Vagueness is often avoidance. And here's the truth. If someone is emotionally available, you still need to check in with your own capacity because availability has to meet availability. Otherwise, we end up in a familiar pattern of longing where love is replaced by trying. Now, fiction always allows us to explore the emotional truth underneath behavior, and that's something I've been exploring heavily in the series book I'm currently developing. Because in real life, we rarely see the contradiction. We see the performance. But the contradiction is where the tension lives. Now, let's talk about the difference that changes everything, the whole avoidance versus capacity, because both can look like the same behavior on the outside. Someone might be distant, someone might not respond, someone might seem emotionally shut, but internally the story can be different. So let's map it out. Avoidance often sounds like I'll figure it out later, but later never comes. Shutting down when feelings get close. Avoidance dress up as busyness. Silence without context. Changing the subject when things get real. Now, avoidance has a pattern. It repeats, it keeps you guessing. Passivity often sounds like I need time to process. I care and I'm overwhelmed. I can show up, but I'm not at full bandwidth today. Give me a day and I'll come back to this. Capacity has honor. Even when it's not perfect, it contains a thread of truth. This is the body based test because your intuition isn't random. When it's avoidance, you may feel anxious, hypervigilant, like you have to chase clarity. And that feeling could be their avoidance or even your avoidance. It feels the same. When it's capacity, you may feel disappointed but not destabilized. You may feel sad but not panicked. Even sense a respectful boundary. You can. Not always, not instantly, but over time, you start to recognize the emotional temperature. And as you recognize it, you can stop yourself when you are in the avoidance sphere, right? Let's move to the part that often hurts. Not overextending emotionally. Because many of us, especially those who are naturally nurturing, have a reflex. We believe if I care harder, if I explain better, if I wait longer, then eventually I'll become safe. But here's what happens when we overextend. We start paying for connection with our own regulation. We sacrifice, our sleep goes, our boundaries go, mental space, sense of self. And then we start resenting, or we spiral, and then we become bitter. So, what does it mean to care without overextending? It means you become the one who listens first. So, try this question after an emotional conversation. Did I meet myself in this moment, or did I abandon myself? If you abandoned yourself, that's a data point, not a personal failure. It tells you something about your boundary. Overextending often includes replying when you're actually flooded, taking responsibility for everyone's emotional world, but not for your own, trying to be the teacher of their healing and ignoring your own no. Capacity based connection includes honesty about your limits, pacing, consent for emotional closeness. Consent. That word matters because emotional closeness should feel invited, not forced, not extracted. Now we're going to talk a little bit about limits, right? Not the cold, defensive kind, the grounded kind. Because recognizing limits is what makes you safe to yourself. Now, in practice, limits could look like stopping performing your emotional availability. So you don't fake fine. You don't have to be available for every season, for every call. You speak from truth, not from fear, because fear says, if I say no, I'll lose them. Truth says, if I care about you, I need to protect my energy. You notice your nervous system cues because your body often warns you before your mind does. Signs that your capacity is full could be sudden irritability, your throat going tight within that conversation that happens, racing thoughts, wanting to escape, numbness, And when those signals show up, your role is not to push through, your role is to pause. So, how do we bring the lens back to theirs? Okay. Recognizing limits isn't judging someone, it's recognizing what's possible. If someone consistently cannot meet you emotionally, no amount of convincing will change their current capacity. And there's a difference between someone being temporarily overwhelmed and someone being chronically emotionally unavailable. If they are incapable or capable, you'll see them prepare. You'll see consistently. You'll see clarity. If they're avoiding, you'll see the ambiguity. You'll see the patterns. And you'll feel often like you're waiting in a fog. And here's the gentle boundary: you're allowed to care, you're allowed to want, but you are not required to abandon yourself to keep the connection alive. So let's just give you some words, right? Because sometimes the hardest part is that we feel guilty for needing boundaries. A few phrases that you could use to stay connected without overextending is: I care about you, and I don't have the emotional bandwidth for this right now. Or I can talk later. I'm not ignoring you, I'm regulating. I want to be present, but I need a slower pace. I can hold space for your feelings, but I'm not able to carry them for you. If you're not ready to talk, I respect that. Let's choose a time to revisit. Say them softly, say them clearly, and then breathe. So before we end, I just want you to ask yourself at the end of this week, or this week, wherever you may find yourself in the week, where have I been confusing avoidance with capacity? Where have I been overextending to earn emotional access? And where or what does my body tell me when I'm at my limit? And if you're ready, share this. Share this in the community, in your community. What is the one boundary you can practice this week that actually feels kind? So, beautiful souls, thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing presence over performance. Thank you for learning emotional availability and starting with yourself. I'll see you in the next one.